Hello, our topic is the Yin Yang Polarity in Venus star points. So a lot of you have heard about Venus star points, you're familiar with them. You may not be as familiar with the idea that there's this alternating quality in these star points, and some are more of a yin style, some are of a yang style, and it alternates between them. Or you may be kind of familiar with it, but a lot of us haven't really put much emphasis on this. I'm going to make this very clear. So we're going to go over what the Venus star points are, what this yin-yang polarity is, and what it implies about understanding the Venus star points in our charts. So the first thing I want to mention is that Venus star points the concept has been developed and popularized by Ariel Gutman. She wrote the book, The Venus Star Point. And there are 5 Venus star points. In a minute, I'll review what these 5 points are. But Venus connects with 5 special points in the sky, and then you can see what those 5 points are that relate to you. So this is relevant to chart interpretation. And you can look it up in a table, like in Ariel's book. She has the tables where you can look them up, or you can just pull them up very easily and quickly in the Sirius software. So we added that feature, and Ariel tested and approved the calculation. So I worked with her on that to make sure that it's done, properly according to the way she does it. But in this video, I want to discuss these interesting attributes of the Venus star points that we often overlook. Now, here's the basic idea of Venus star points, is that every 8 years, there's a Sun-Venus conjunction at the same degree. And there are 5 conjunctions that lead up to that. Let me show you on the next slide what I mean by lead up to it. This table is color-coded to make this very clear and as simple as I can make it. On June 3rd, 2020, this is the GMT, the Greenwich Mean Time. We don't need to be concerned with that right now. But from a heliocentric point of view, a lot of what is said is true about Venus star points. From a geocentric point of view, it's actually confusing and not always true what people are saying about Venus star points. So let's look at it heliocentrically first. Heliocentrically, people say that there are 5 Sun-Venus conjunctions in 8 years. That's correct, heliocentrically. Geocentrically, technically speaking, that's not correct, which I'll explain in a minute. But let's look at it helio first. On June 3rd, 2020, of course, helio, you don't have a sun, you have an Earth. So on June 3rd, 2020, Earth, this is a symbol for Earth, is conjunct Venus at 13 Sagittarius 36. Then heliocentrically, on January 9th, 2022, that's about 1 year and 7 months. So 1 year and 7 months later, very roughly, a little bit more than that, 1 year and 7 months later, there's another Earth-Venus conjunction. Happens to be at 18 Cancer, rounded off to the nearest degree. A year and 7 months later, August 13, 2023, another one, and then another one, March 23rd, 2025. That's, at 2 degrees Libra. And then a 5th one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, October 24th, 2026. Every 1 year, 7 months, heliocentrically, the Sun, Earth, and Venus are lined up. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? I mean, they're just, boom, in a straight line every 1 year, 7 months. And then on the 6th one, so if we start June 3rd, 2021, green is 2, this is 3, light blue 4, gray 5. The 6th one comes almost exactly 8 years later. 2 days less than 8 years later. So on June 1st, 2028, so we go from June 3rd, 2020 to June 1st, 2028. That's 8 years minus 2 days, another alignment in the same place in the sky. So the idea is this. The Sun, the Earth, and Venus, boom, perfectly in a line. Astrologically, you think that might be important. And then it happens 5 times, and then it happens at the same direction of the sky. So it's like, comes right back. It's a beautiful pattern. Every 8 years, that alignment happens in the same place in the sky. When we say same place, it's actually 2 degrees earlier. So we see these 3 yellow Sun-Venus conjunctions, and the first one in 2020 is at 13 degrees Sagittarius. 8 years later in 2028, it's at 11 degrees Sagittarius. 8 years later in 2036, it's at 9 Sagittarius. So those Sun-Venus, Sun-Earth-Venus alignments, all in a row in the same way, are color-coded. And the idea is not only are they aligned, but they're aligned in the same way. It's going Earth to Venus, Sun to Venus to Earth. So Sun, Venus, and then Earth in a straight line. That's what's really happening astronomically. When people say, as they often do, that there are 5 conjunctions of Sun and Venus every 8 years, what we're really saying is that from a heliocentric point of view, you will see Venus and the Earth behind it. That's what's happening. Geocentrically, from the Earth's point of view, it's something different. And there are not 5 conjunctions in 8 years, there are 10 conjunctions. So when we hear this over and over, 5 conjunctions in 8 years, no, from the geocentric point of view, there are 10 conjunctions in those 8 years. So let's go back to this slide because I want to mention one more thing. In this listing, it's showing the, this is geocentric, and it's showing the latitude of Venus. So on June 3rd, 2020, there's a Sun-Venus conjunction, and the latitude of Venus is almost half a degree. So when that latitude is very small, as it gets close to 0, it means that Venus and the Sun are at the same point in the sky, rather than what usually happens where they're conjunct, but they're not actually at the same point. Venus, in these examples, in 2020, 2028, 2036, Venus is slightly north of the Sun, so they're not touching. If they're really close, that suggests they're even more powerful, and that's a very rare event. And by the way, this listing is produced in the Sirius software. So if you're not able to get this listing and you would like to get it, and you're wondering how I got it, that's how I did it. Okay, I showed you this listing. Now, let me show you the astronomy of this and where this yin-yang polarity comes from. Let's think about it. The Sun, of course, is the center of the solar system. And now we're showing Venus. I just got this image from earthsky.org website. There's Venus going around the Sun, and then in this outer ring is the Earth going around the Sun. So both Venus and Earth go around the Sun, as we know. And what happens is that, let's look at these positions shown here with this black circle in the front of Venus. This is called an inferior conjunction of Sun and Venus from our point of view. So from our point of view on Earth, which is how we normally do astrology, Sun and Venus are conjunct. They're in the same direction of the sky. It's an inferior conjunction because Venus is closer to us. Venus can be conjunct Sun when Venus is on the opposite side of the Sun. That's a superior conjunction. So there's 2 kinds of conjunctions. That's the polarity. The polarity is that we have an inferior conjunction of Sun-Venus, then we have a superior one, and then an inferior. It alternates. Now, this is what's happening geocentrically. So when there's an inferior conjunction, the speed of Venus, what we call the apparent speed, is different from when Venus is opposition the Sun, when it's on the other side of the Sun. So when the Venus is over here, see this label, it's a superior conjunction with an arrow pointing to Venus. When Venus is here, it's still conjunct the Sun from our point of view. We look this way, we see Sun and we see Venus. Actually, the light of the Sun is going to block out Venus, but if it didn't block it out, we would see Venus. And Venus typically is a little above or below the Sun, So you would actually still see it. So they're both, this is a conjunction, but the Earth is going to our right in its motion. Venus is going to our left. So here's the bottom line. When there's a Sun-Venus superior conjunction, Venus is moving direct and it's moving very fast. What's its fastest speed? A little over 1.5 degrees, I think. It's going fast. So if you have a Sun-Venus conjunction in your chart, Venus is either moving very fast or it's retrograde. It's one extreme or the other. If it's an inferior conjunction, Venus is retrograde because the Earth is like passing it by and Venus appears to be going backwards. So, bottom line, there are two kinds of Sun-Venus conjunctions. One where Venus is very fast, that's the superior conjunction. One where Venus is retrograde, opposite situation. Either extremely fast at superior conjunction or retrograde at inferior conjunction. And it alternates between them. Also notice this. When there's an inferior conjunction, Venus is close to the Earth. From the heliocentric point of view, Venus and the Earth are conjunct. So I have a summary here up at the top. Sun conjunct Venus and Venus retrograde. So Sun conjunct Venus and Venus retrograde, that's an inferior conjunction. That's a helio-Earth. From the helio point of view, Earth is conjunct Venus. At the superior conjunction, when Venus appears to be moving very fast, what you have heliocentrically is that Venus is opposition the Earth. Well, if all of this starts getting dyslexic in your mind, your head is spinning, don't worry about it. It's actually very simple. And you can play this a few times and watch it. It's a simple idea. It's just how things look from the sun's point of view and from our point of view. And I just want to emphasize that this creates the yin-yang polarity. Now let's summarize some things, some kind of bottom line conclusions to show you how this can help remove some misunderstandings. I've got summarized here at the bottom. In 8 years, let's go back to our 8-year cycle. Let's go back to, where do I have it? This listing. This is done helio, because in helio it's simpler. In helio, every 8 years, there are these 5 conjunctions, and they do make a 5-pointed star. So heliocentrically, it's true. It's true that this next Sun-Venus, the next Earth-Venus conjunction will happen at a 5-pointed star point, and the next one another 5-pointed star, and after 5 of them, it returns back within 2 degrees. So in 8 years, number 1, I've got my cursor on these critical points here. There are 5 helio-Earth-Venus conjunctions. That's what I just said. Heliocentrically, there are 5. However, there are 10 geocentric Sun-Venus conjunctions in 8 years. So when we say that there are 5 conjunctions of Sun and Venus in 8 years, well, actually there are 10, because there are 5 where Venus is direct and 5 where it's retrograde. So what's happening is that from a heliocentric point of view, Earth and Venus are conjunct every 1 year, 7 months. But from a geocentric point of view, Sun and Venus are conjunct twice as often, because it'll happen once when Venus is direct and in inferior conjunction, and once when, did I say that right? It'll happen once when Venus is retrograde and in inferior conjunction, and once when Venus is direct in superior conjunction. It's happening, we have the retrograde in addition. So instead of every 1 year, 7 months, there is a Sun-Venus conjunction every 9.5 months, twice as often. Okay, and half of those are direct and half are retrograde. So there are 5 Sun-Venus conjunctions where Venus is direct, and 5 Sun-Venus conjunctions where Venus is retrograde in 8 years. So just bottom line, I know this is a lot of stuff. Maybe I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. But all I'm saying is that If somebody says Sun is conjunct Venus 5 times in 8 years, no, it's 10 times. Sun is conjunct Venus 10 times in 8 years. 5 of them are direct and 5 are retrograde. Right? That's all. Main thing I'm trying to get across here. That's all. And if you want to know the exact number of days, Sun and Venus and Earth are aligned every 584 days in the same alignment. Sun, Venus, Earth. So every 584 days, approximately 1 year, 7 months, they are aligned. That's what the astronomers are referring to. But from our point of view geocentrically, Sun is conjunct Venus twice as often, which is every 292 days, about 9.5 months. And also notice this. When Sun is conjunct Venus and Venus is retrograde at this inferior conjunction, heliocentrically there's an Earth-Venus conjunction. At the other kind, the other polarity situation where Venus is moving fast in a superior conjunction, Venus and Earth are opposition to each other. Okay, so let me go on to, I want to show you this. Well, let me summarize this point again. Sun conjunct Venus and Venus retrograde, helio is an Earth conjunct Venus. So whenever there's a heliocentric Earth conjunction Venus, then Sun is conjunct Venus and Venus is retrograde. Whenever there's a heliocentric Earth opposition Venus, then Sun is conjunct Venus and Venus is direct. So this polarity can be looked at as a heliocentric conjunction and opposition, is identical in time, within minutes usually, of occurring at the same time as the Sun conjunct Venus geocentrically, like we do in astrology, where one is retrograde and one is direct. There's this yin-yang polarity where heliocentric, you go from conjunction to opposition, conjunction to opposition. It's like a seesaw. And while heliocentrically you have this seesaw, conjunction to opposition, simultaneously, every time you say conjunction heliocentrically, you're saying there's a geocentric Sun-Venus, and Venus is retrograde. So it's Sun-Venus conjunction retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct. And they're all evenly spaced. They're occurring fairly regularly. There's some slight deviation because the speed of Earth and Venus varies a little bit. It's not exactly precise, but fairly regularly, almost perfectly regularly, these things happen. Okay, and to show you how close they are in time, here's the time of the geocentric Sun-Venus conjunction on June 3rd. Is at 5:43. If you look at it heliocentrically, the exact moment of that alignment is 3 minutes earlier. In this case, in the next case, on June 1st, there's a 4-minute difference, 4 minutes of time, and this one, 4 minutes of time. They're occurring at almost the same, within minutes of each other. You'll have the heliocentric alignment and the geocentric, because they're the same thing. They're just aligned. The only reason there's a few minutes difference is because of how the planets are moving up and down off the ecliptic plane, and there's a slight difference in technical measurement. But they're essentially the same thing and technically happening within minutes of each other. And just to show you in the Sirius software, if you do a time adjust while you're looking at the listing, just to confirm, you'll see that on June 3rd, 2020, at Greenwich Mean Time, 5:43 and 20 seconds. So the listing says 5:43, rounded off to the nearest minute. That's correct. It's actually 20 seconds later. When you do the time adjust, you see that they're exactly the same. Anyway, there are ways to confirm that, yes, these calculations are right, because some people see this listing. This is just copied and pasted right out of the software, and I just did this highlight to show the comparison of the geocentric and heliocentric, those times are accurate, and that's a way to confirm it. Okay, we already looked at this. This is 2 cycles of heliocentric Earth-Venus conjunctions. Now, to make sure you've got this, this is showing 5 conjunctions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each cycle, because we're doing it heliocentrically, Earth, Venus. Question, just to make sure you got this. If I show this same listing geocentric, which is the normal thing we do in astrology, how many Sun-Venus conjunctions will there be? And I've shown, here I've listed both positions to confirm. That's the exact conjunction at this exact time. Are there still going to be 5 if I do this geocentric? How many will there be? There will be 10. There are 10 conjunctions geocentric, half of them direct, half of them retrograde. Did you get it right? So we say there are 5 Sun-Venus conjunctions in 8 years. There are 10. Half of them direct, half of them retrograde. So the 5 points of each cycle form a 5-pointed star. So if you put 13 Sag, 36, 18 Cancer, 43, if you put these positions in a chart wheel and you draw lines between them, you do get a 5-pointed star. So these conjunctions heliocentrically of Earth and Venus form a 5-pointed star. And the conjunctions, as we will see geocentrically, also do. And now let me tell you something else. Each point is about 144 degrees before the previous point. So 18 Cancer 43 is about 144 degrees before 13 Sag 36. So each one of these points is 144 degrees approximately, usually very close to that, earlier. From 18 Cancer to 20 Aquarius, and 20 Aquarius, actually it'll vary several degrees, but it'll pretty close to 144 degrees, which is 2/5 of a circle. Okay. Now, here is a list of the 10 geocentric conjunctions and the 10 heliocentric conjunctions from 2020 to 2028. So here's the 8 years of conjunctions. And what do you notice? One thing you'll notice is that there are twice as many geocentric conjunctions as helio. We have geo, helio, geo, geo, helio, geo, geo, helio, geo, geo, helio, geo. So there are 10 geocentric conjunctions and 5 heliocentric conjunctions. And also, the heliocentric conjunctions occur at the same time as the geocentric conjunctions when Venus is retrograde. So I put the retrograde RX there, meaning Venus is retrograde. So on June 3rd, 2020, Sun is conjunct Venus and Venus is retrograde. If you look at a chart and you see Sun conjunct Venus and Venus is retrograde, if you do heliocentric, you're going to see that Earth and Venus are conjunct. Absolutely, you will see that, as I explained earlier. We looked at that diagram of the, that illustration, I should say, of the inferior and superior conjunctions. So I put in yellow here. Why are these 2 in yellow? To show that they're at the same exact moment, June 3rd, within 3 minutes of each other. So the retrograde, Venus retrograde conjunction is the same as helio conjunction. So how am I going to get twice as many helio to match this? I need to add the helio oppositions. If I add helio oppositions, then I will have the 5 helio conjunctions and the 5 helio oppositions, and then we'll have the 1-to-1 correspondence, which is right here. So this slide shows you what is actually happening over the 8 years. What's actually happening is on June 3rd, I've combined together 2 listings here, a geo listing and a helio listing, and I've color-coded it so you can see what's happening. This is just to show you that what I'm saying is actually true. I'm not making this up. On June 3rd, Sun and Venus are conjunct, and Venus is retrograde. At the same time, there's a Earth-Venus conjunction, and so on. Every time there's a Sun-Venus conjunction and Venus is direct, there's a helio-opposition. So again, that seesaw. As the heliocentric goes from conjunction to opposition simultaneously, it's actually the same exact thing seen from a different perspective. You're seeing the Sun-Venus retrograde conjunction seesawing with the Sun-Venus and Venus direct. Same exact thing. These are the two very different kinds of Sun-Venus conjunctions. So if you have a Sun-Venus conjunction and it's direct, it's a very different type. That's happening when there's a helio opposition. That's the Yang kind. That's the fast, expressive, get it out into the world Sun-Venus conjunction. Then it alternates. Perfect 50-50 balance here. Then it alternates with the more introverted, retrograde Sun-Venus conjunction. So in 5 years, in 8 years, you'll have 5 extroverted, fast Sun-Venus conjunctions, and you'll have 5 introverted Sun-Venus conjunctions. Which one are you on? So when you look at your 5 star points, you can see if, which ones are direct and which ones are retrograde. Okay, so let me go back because I skipped over this slide. So this just summarized what I already said. You have 2 types of Sun-Venus conjunctions. Red, which is the retrograde kind, and the direct Sun-Venus conjunction. Okay, now I got really carried away here. I made a, I really didn't need to do this, but I wanted to make sure that everything's really right. So I made a list over, over 12 years, 2020, over 20 years. I got really carried away. And I put a red star next to all of the Sun-Venus conjunctions. This is our normal geocentric. This is what we astrologers do to show they're connected. So on June 3rd, 2020, the Sun-Venus conjunction at 13 Gemini is connected to the one at 11 Gemini, 8 years later, is connected to the one at 9 Gemini, another 8 years ago. Connected, I mean it's in the same place in the sky, only 2 degrees different. And so you have a blue heart and a red heart. The blue heart is the direct version, and the red heart is the retrograde version of that cycle. And on the right side, I produced a listing of retrograde and direct times of Venus, so you could see everything going on. This is maybe a little more detailed than any of us really need. But for example, on November 14th, 2026, Venus goes direct at 22 Libra. Now, if I go over here, the next date after November 14th, 2026 is August 12th. So that's the direct conjunction. And then a little bit after that, in May 2028, May 10, 2028, May 10, 2028, Venus turns retrograde. And so this next conjunction, less than a month later in June, is the retrograde one. Anyway, that's the change in speeds. You can see when they're changing speed, and that in fact, this is the cycle going on. The interesting thing is that all of these conjunctions, and they're alternating between, I've got the direct in blue, the retrograde in red, perfectly alternating. They're all equally spaced in time. The retrogrades occur, the Venus retrograde conjunctions occur right in between the direct ones. You can understand that by understanding it heliocentrically. They're conjunctions and oppositions heliocentrically. So they're just, from a heliocentric point of view, Venus has just gone to the opposite end of the sky. And this is what it looks like in a chart wheel. On the left, I've put in here on March 26, 2021, a Sun-Venus conjunction at 5 Aries 50. Go 144 degrees earlier. Now this is where the beauty of this sacred geometry gets really interesting. You go 144 degrees earlier and you'll get to the next one, the next direct. I'm showing only the direct here. 5 out of the 10 that occur. And then 144 degrees before that, you get to 14 Gemini. And then 144 degrees before that, 16 Capricorn. 144 degrees before that, 19 Leo. And then you're back to the beginning. So on March 23rd, 2029, that's 8 years later and about a little more than 2 days, about 2.5 days, less than 8 years, you have a conjunction at a little more than 2 degrees earlier at 3 Aries. Now I'm at a half hour. I'm going to make a second video in this series. I'm going to pick up with this slide to show you how, and this gets to the really, I think, very cool part of this, how the polarized yin-yang thing going on here, that some of the half of the Sun-Venus conjunctions, Venus is direct, half they're retrograde, and how they overlap and interact. I'll do that in the next slide. So that's it for the first, I'm pretty sure will be a 2-part series, and I'll continue in the second part of this series with this slide to explain this next phase of what's going on with the Venus star points. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.